People who just up and left one day and started a new life. What was your experience like? I'm about to do this on Friday with only a suitcase cause I've been fired and homelessness is coming. Any suggestions on where to go? Edit, boss decided to rescind his decision after his 2 weeks notice of firing me. Holy macaroni, this is fantastic. Also I live where I work, so that's why I was facing homelessness on Friday. Also, these are all great tips and may look into and do that after I leave where I currently am, hopefully on my own terms. I did this a year and a half ago. Best thing I've ever done. Moved from Western New York to Arizona. It was tough at first with trying to get on my feet, and when I did, the pandemic started. But it's easier to do than most people think. I believe most people don't do it because of the unknown and scared of change. For me, I'm happier than I've ever been. I have a really good paying job. The best paying job I've ever had actually. And the first job I've ever had that I enjoy going to. I'm 34, so that's saying something. And to live where I live, views of mountains, beautiful weather. It's just a dream come true. 4 years ago, I abruptly quit a job I had worked for 5 years that I finally had to admit was a dead end. I got a job at a lodge in a national park flipping burgers for minimum wage. I didn't know a single person there when I moved. But it quickly led to traveling to amazing places like Alaska and making lots of friends from all over the world. The experience gave me the confidence to really pursue my career goals, and last year I finally got my dream job. Nothing good happens in your comfort zone. Edit, I've never had a comment get nearly this much feedback, and I regret the wording of that last sentence, which I didn't think through. It was more aimed at those who are feeling stuck and have big dreams but are afraid to make a change. There's nothing wrong at all with being happy with what you have, and with having a more stable existence. In fact, I'm really looking forward to settling down soon and having a more comfy life. I'm sorry my wording came off kind of judgmental. That was not my intention. To answer some questions that are coming up, I'm working as an illustrator and designer for the national parks. It was a really difficult road, working crappy kitchen jobs and working/volunteering on the side to build my resume. Financially, working seasonally can be difficult, and I was scraping by for a few years until I got my current job. It was the right choice for me, but maybe not for everyone. I did this last year. Granted, I stayed in the same state. It was terrifying and exciting all rolled into one. I quit my job without having another one. Sold my house without having a home. Packed everything my son and I owned and moved 3 hours away. Best decision ever. It made me feel like I could do it again if I ever wanted to. The world is so big, so it was empowering. Edit, I grew up in the country, lived in the same county for 31 years, and moved to the city. 3 hours away may not seem like much, but it was a huge change. A year ago me and my partner were addicted to drugs, living in a little room, depressed with no motivation, so we just up and left. Today we are in our own place in the country with steady jobs, and I have never been happier. 3 years ago I moved from London, UK to Alberta, Canada. Best decision of my life. London is a very lonely city, especially when you're introverted. I never made any real close friends, and it's so insanely expensive that even with a great job I didn't have much money left to go out and enjoy life. And I lived in a small, awful shared apartment where the only space to myself was a probably 20 square feet room or smaller. It is an amazing city, but it didn't work for me. Since being in Alberta I've made some close friends and met the love of my life. I finally have savings and realistic prospect of buying a house one day. I live in a huge, 2-bedroom apartment by myself. I live near the Rockies, so I do a good amount of hiking. I've been tubing and ice skating with friends. Pre-COVID I started going to a new gym, and on the first session had people saying hi. Probably could have been friends if COVID hadn't hit. Not to mention it's so sunny. The cold is extreme, but I will never miss the grey and rain of England. I moved here with a 2-week Airbnb reservation, $5,000 to survive off and no real plan, no jobs prospects. Just the knowledge I could book a flight home if needed. Somehow it all ended up working out. Edit: I'm stupid and was tired when I wrote this, so I estimated the sides of my room in London, then added instead of multiplying. The room was probably more like 70 square feet. I came here through IEC, which is a reciprocal working holiday program for young people that many countries participate in. The US doesn't participate. This post was very black and white. London is really amazing. I had a lot of great times there. I do miss a lot, but ultimately it wasn't for me. Alberta has its issues, as everywhere does, and the economy is struggling with the oil stuff. Canada isn't some utopia. I have happened to make a good life for myself here and I personally love it. But no hate on the UK, it'll always be my home and I really miss roundabouts. I did this 3 months back, shifted from Delhi, my hometown where I lived with my parents and brother, to Bangalore. I had been depressed for the last 3 years. Worked in a very unsatisfactory job and did almost no work. Then in March this year I had a manic episode of bipolar I where I spent all my savings on useless stuff, almost got married to a woman I barely knew and quit my job. I was jobless with no money and having panic attacks every day, remembering the shit I did and said when I was manic. Also, thanks to COVID, every problem became 10x. I was suicidal most of the time. Months later I did get a job, but the pay was meager. One fine day, 8 months later, I fought with my brother and I had had enough. So later that night packed some of my stuff and booked my flight to Bangalore and quit my job. After 2 months of struggle I got a new job with almost thrice the income. Rented my own 2 BHK flat all for myself. Threw all my old clothes and got new ones. Started 3 other things. Started learning boxing and lots more. All my friends live nearby and best of all I live in the best area probably in all of India. Everything is so much better that sometimes I think it is all in my head and I am actually in coma from a suicide attempt. Tell me this is real. I don't know how it will work for others, but I think it is worth a shot. Thanks a lot for all the love, it really made my day. There is a lot of concern of this being a sign of me being manic again. Some people with bipolar know someone with bipolar are asking me how I know this is not mania. These are the steps I am taking, hopefully it helps someone. I have a 12-point scale that I rate myself every day on. 0 is utterly suicidal, 1 to 2 is dark depression, 3 is mild depression, 4 is low mood, 5 to 6 is stable, 7 to 8 is high energy caution, 9 to 10 is hypomania, 11 to 12 is paranoid mania. When I came to Bangalore on an impulse I was 4, then 5 to 6 and hovered at 7 to 8 and sometimes 9. I take regular therapy sessions, at least 4 times a month from a clinical psychologist trained in dealing with bipolar. She regularly accesses and checks signs of mania/depression. Whenever I reach 8/9 on the 12-point scale I contact my psychiatrist to make sure I don't climb higher. He prescribes olanzapine, anti-mania drug, as SOS. He initially told me to take it every day, but that drug fucks up my emotions/energy, so I tightly monitor my mood and take it SOS in consultation with him. I have an impulse control rule: whenever something sounds impulsive/too good I first talk about it with friends and family to check if I am not crazy again, then set a time duration after which I can act on the impulse. I am prescribed one med and I take that every day without fail whatsoever happens. Also I refrain from drugs. I always wanted to do LSD, etc., but I won't ever because that instantly triggers mania in lot of people. So I am trying my best not to go manic/in depression again. Let's hope it works. Best of luck to all bipolar people out there, much love. There is a silver lining, trust me. I was 26 years old, divorced, and living in Saudi Arabia, my home country, with extremely religious, cult-like family. As a woman, you can imagine what an absolute fucking nightmare that was. This was before any of the reformations of dear emps in the country. The guardian system made it near fucking impossible to break free from an abusive household. I didn't know what to do. I had a good degree. I spoke English like a native. After a failed suicide attempt, I decided it was time to finally leave this hellhole. So on December 30, 2014, with nothing more than my legal documents, a suitcase, and a carry-on, I crossed the causeway to Bahrain with the help of friends and got on a plane to the United States. It's been over 6 years. I was numb until I landed on American soil. Once I could breathe the air of freedom, I broke down. I was taken advantage of my first year in this country. I received death threats, hate mail, temper tantrums from my mom that finally culminated in her telling me that I was dead to her and to never contact her again. I couldn't work for a whole year. Even after, it took 8 months to find a job and it paid shit. I was homeless. I rented a room from a murderer. He did his time though. Lots of weird shit. Then in the last 2 years my life really began. I found my hobbies. I found myself. I found a new family. My dog and I hike and travel a lot. Then I met the love of my life and he has joined our wonderful little pack. I miss family. I miss certain aspects of my culture. I feel bad for not trying to make more of a change. I feel like a coward sometimes, but I just wanted to live. I didn't want to be a hero or a martyr or a dissident. I literally just wanted the freedom to be able to go out of my house whenever I wanted to without someone interrogating me like some kind of criminal. I wanted to be able to accept a job and not have to have my father give his consent so I can work. I wanted to adopt a dog, go on hikes, travel the world, fall in love. I didn't want to stay in my father's house waiting until a man feels sorry enough for me to add me to his collection of wives. I was 26 and divorced. Women my age in my culture don't get single eligible bachelors. Those are reserved for the 16 to 21-year-olds. Sold everything and got on a Greyhound with my 2 little kids and went across country to a big city I had visited once and loved. We've been here 11 years now. Have never regretted making this our home. It was very hard. We have struggled so much. But the decent life we have now made it worthwhile. Well, if this counts as starting a new life, but when I was a young teen my single, disabled mother, me, and my little sister was living in a toxic house with someone while we were down on our luck. I mean the people we stayed with would lock us out constantly, then scream at us when we knocked to come in, stalk the bathrooms and try to barge in on us, so we had to all go together, and go to sleep at like 7 p.m. and expect it to be silent after that. It was so bad that my mother finally decided she would rather be homeless than have to deal with that toxic place. So, in the middle of the night we slipped the AC out the window and snuck out the window and never looked bad. The 2 years that passed after that weren't much better. We slept in our car and had to bathe at the beach. It was hard working every day and hiding we were homeless. But we finally got a place last year that we're all so thankful for. For anyone that is in an abusive, toxic household thinking of leaving but too afraid to do it. It won't be easy at first, but stay strong and keep faith, and never give up. Good things will eventually come out of it. It's worth the struggle to have peace, mentally and emotionally. Edit, specified my age better lol. Also, thanks for all the upvotes and awards. I hope this gives someone in a rough situation the courage to seek better things. Good luck to everyone. A 3-day bus ride from Illinois to New York. I was so tired when I got there. I didn't see my future wife for almost an hour and felt that she got cold feet seeing as we had never met. We met, went to one of her friend's house and got to know each other, and wound up making out on her couch. 20 plus years and 3 kids later, I haven't regretted a single day. I walked out on my abusive ex while he was in central booking with a single suitcase and a bunch of cats in carriers, took an Uber 5 hours north, and totally started over. New name, new, claimed, birthday, new hair color. It was the most liberating experience of my life, and, even though I still suffer residual effects from old injuries, being free of that bastard is a million reasons to be happy. Edit, thanks for the gold, guys. You just made my day. 3 years ago USA to Japan. Got a visa through a teaching company, but they completely changed plans on me as soon as I arrived. I told them that I was assured before leaving that I'd be living in a particular place, and would not be happy in place B. I politely declined. Took all my money, about 3,000, and went about searching for something else. After blowing almost all my money, I eventually met someone amazing who helped me get in the right direction. Eventually I was offered a job after many applications and interviews, but didn't even have a place to live, was living in a capsule hotel. After securing the job, I spent the rest of my money and maxed out my credit card on an apartment. It was a gamble, but I never had failure in my mind. I spent the first month sleeping on my clothes until I had enough for a futon, then a bed. That amazing person who helped me and encouraged me to keep searching never stopped either, and is now my beautiful pregnant wife. I don't think I can win the lottery again. In the year 2000, I was starting to become severely depressed, and heading towards suicide. I was living in shitty surroundings in a town outside of Philadelphia. I kept needing an answer out of things, instead of the permanent way. The worse things got there, the more I wanted to flee. I had no ties there, anyway. I moved to San Francisco. I drove there, alone, cross-country. My mother and grandparents were totally understanding. We were all a family of nomads anyway, living different places my entire life. So, it was not super scary for me to start over again somewhere else. I went from the abrasive, dour, unfriendly, East Coast to a city where people told me I was beautiful on a near daily basis. This is coming from an overweight chick, who was always made fun of for it. It took me about 6 months to believe it. San Francisco was amazing for the self-esteem and confidence that I didn't have much of. People started conversation with me, and treated me well, and you could truly be who you were without judgment. I had been thinking about moving back lately. However, I understand it's a completely different city now, unfortunately. I stayed for about a year and then moved to New Mexico, and have been here since. Save for a 5-year stint from 11/2007 to 12/2012 in North Carolina, where I had planned on going to college, which didn't work out. That was a terrible decision all around. I love it here, in my quiet small town. But I wouldn't trade that year in SF for anything, because I learned so about myself, and again, it was a wonderful place for my self-esteem. Edit, clarity. I moved from Colorado to Oregon 5 years ago, partially to end my 5-year abusive relationship and mostly to simply experience another state and to try to not feel stuck with depression and life in general. Though I got booted from my dream apartment in Eugene due to needed renovations, I now have more income to put towards my dream of tattoo school, hopefully this spring. COVID restrictions, and am living with my amazing boyfriend of 7 months. I am in a metal band and never would have dreamed of pushing my boundaries like this 2 years ago, or of someone who treats me the way my current guy does. Life uprooting? I recommend it. Edit, thank you for my first award, poop. In 2019, at barely 80 pounds and with a full-blown prescription drug addiction, I decided to stop showing up to a job I had been working for over a decade. With no plan B, I traveled to New Zealand, got sober, then France, got engaged, Italy, Alaska, got married, and then the Maldives. I'm living in the US and have a quiet and stress-free 9-to-5, run an Etsy shop as a hobby that has been doing pretty well, and have been sober for 1 year and 1 month. The shutdown pushed me to have a new life. I lost my job and my savings were only going to last less than 1 month. So I left and took my boyfriend with me. We volunteered on farms in exchange for a room and food. We worked in Vermont first on this gorgeous 40-acre farm that had sheep, cows, chickens, and bees. Then we decided to drive across the country to Oregon to work on another farm. Then another farm in Arizona. Then my boyfriend proposed and we got married in Las Vegas. Then we both found amazing jobs in Oregon again. A year ago I was a bartender and working 2 side jobs to make ends meet. I was barely surviving and I literally worked every day. I worked 50+ hours and still didn't have a savings or medical insurance. It was exhausting. Now, I'm working in a field I always wanted to get into. I married an incredible man. I have health insurance, and a freaking savings account. Also, since we didn't have many expenses, we used our stimulus checks to invest and we turned those checks into $20,000 and counting in profits. We were scared to leave, we didn't know if we could make it. We were scared to invest our money, we didn't think we could turn a profit. We kept being afraid of change, but if we had given in to our fears we would be back home, miserable, broke, and jobless. I'm glad we left. One-way flight to Alaska. Geez, after reading some of these comments, this is exactly what I did. I was 24, wasted college getting a degree I've never used, working a dead-end grocery store job and living with my parents. Started dating this 30-year-old woman with a 9-year-old kid, which was nuts to me even now. After dating for maybe only 6 months or so, she told me she was moving to AS for a job and she'd like me to go with her. Taking a look at my life currently, I decided to say yes, and here I am 15 years later. We are married with 2 of our own kids, careers and home ownership. Some rough parts at times, sure, but I wouldn't change a thing, except maybe trying to meet her a little sooner in life. My ex and I packed everything we could in our Jeep, plus our dogs, and left Florida for Maine. It went, "Hey, I hate it here, don't you? Let's move far, far away." One side trip to visit my parents, and about 35 hours of drive time later, we arrived to coastal Maine. Shortly after, the ex and I broke up. And life got really difficult and lonely. I was in the middle of a crisis and culture shock, having moved from Miami to small town Maine. I didn't have a single soul here. I bounced around a few jobs, and some days I would go home and cry on my dogs because I was just so alone. I asked myself daily if this was the right decision. One day, I decided I didn't want to be sad anymore. I'd gotten over the ex, and got a new job. The job sucked, but there I met my now closest and best girlfriends. I started to save a little. I found a nice house with a big yard to rent. I got new furniture. April will be 6 years I am here, and though I struggled for about a year and doubted my decision, sometimes hourly, moving was by far the absolute best thing I could have ever done for myself. I left some toxic family, some less than ideal friends, and a state that I hate. Now my winters are spent playing in the snow with my dogs, and my summers, pre-COVID of course, are spent working hard and having fun with my friends. I have a job I love. I'm glad I stuck to my decision, despite the struggles I had. If you are in a rut and have the chance to start fresh somewhere with a better job and lifestyle, then just do it. Modern transport and telecommunications mean that keeping in touch with friends and family is easier than ever. I took a chance and moved from a crappy place in the UK to Central Europe 12 years ago, and it completely transformed my life in almost every meaningful way. I went from really strongly disliking the place I live in and the kind of people I had contact with, to now living in what is for me a paradise, working in stimulating and increasingly well-paid jobs and surrounded mostly by positive and intellectual people. Also, my quality of life is just awesome and my health and fitness is now really good. I still haven't met my soulmate or life partner, but I've no idea if that person even exists, and at least I have had some good along the way with some great and memorable people. Lord knows what I would have been doing with my life if I hadn't have taken that chance. Probably in some uninspiring job in an uninspiring place, dreaming about how my life could have been different if only I'd had more balls. Life is short, so take what opportunities you can to make it better. This is a dream of mine to do. I suppose I did too. My best friend and I boarded a plane to Australia from the UK the day of our final exams at university. I live in AS still 7 years later, with the love of my life, 2 dogs and a thriving career. I've done it 4 times now. Once involved immigrating to a new country. I have always made housing arrangements before I go. And once I did have a job lined up. The older I get, the easiest it gets. I definitely prefer solitude, so the first chunk of time in a new place is lovely. being alone and completely free. Doing what I want and answering to nobody. I've learned to take my time making friends. And getting involved in my community. This last move, at the beginning of the pandemic, really changed my whole life. I've walked away from my career and my community work. I'm starting a business. I've made friends with people I really appreciate instead of making friends with people because of work and community networking needs. Each move has led to massive changes in who I am and how I live. What my priorities are. And this is a very good thing. This latest move and the pandemic really forced me to slow down and listen to what I need and who I am. That's the best part of picking up and leaving. You only have yourself. It's fucking magic. The worst part is the time it takes to make friends. Sometimes you just want to go for a beer and chat. It can get a little lonely. Phone calls and video chats just aren't the same. But soon enough friends will come along. Enjoy the alone time while you've got it. It's good to get out into the world and experience a different life, to see things from a different vantage. It's good to learn that you can trust and rely on yourself, to see your strength, and your weakness, your bravery. And honestly, we've only got one life. If wherever you go sucks, pick up and do it again. Go where you need to go to be happy. Your happiness has value. But don't forget, wherever you go, there you are. Moving isn't a magic trick that'll cure all that ails you. You still have to do the work to overcome whatever is going on that's making you want to run. It might just be a little easier when you have a clean slate. I saved money throughout college years and moved out of the abusive home right after I graduated. Cut all contact. It's been decades since. I'm often surprised that I actually fit into this category. I was in my 20s, living at home. Honestly, I wanted to move out so badly, but my mom was really attached to me and panicked whenever I said I was going to move out. Even though I have 3 siblings, 1 older, 2 younger, who had already moved out, hey, it's not easy being the favorite. But I was seeing that although I had a good job, my social life was garbage. I'd come home, eat and play computer games. I had a few close female friends, but, come on, I'm living at home with my parents, plus I was shy, and embarrassed of the living at home thing, so relationships never went where I wanted them. Then I was chatting with a high school friend in another country, and for kicks I flew out to see him. Then I got a job at the company he worked at, so I decided, well, I'll go for a few months or so and see if I like it. One close co-worker said simply, if you don't go, you'll always regret not going. If you go and you don't like it, just come back, which made perfect sense. Plus coming home and finding an apartment instead of moving back home was an out to get out from under mom's apron strings. Hey, she has 3 other kids. So I went. And almost immediately, I met several women, and, being confident that I was an actual adult with my own place, I didn't have any problem convincing them I was good boyfriend material. Serially, not at the same time. Mostly. I moved jobs, and felt good about being a grown-up. Eventually bought a house, got married, have kids. We go home every year. It used to be only at Christmas, but then it was twice a year so my kids could know their cousins and relatives. So I'll always have 2 homes and 2 hometowns now. It was such a hard decision for me to go, and it was almost spur of the moment. 2,500 miles from home. I often wonder where I'd be in life if I hadn't gone. I mean, if I had just sacked up and moved out, would I have changed in the same way? I don't know. But I had to try it, and I'm so thankful for that friend who told me, if you don't do it, you'll always regret it, but if you go and don't like it, you can always come back. He was 100% right. Can I add a slight script flip for anyone motivated by this thread? My brother did this, and I'm so proud of him. But if you join the armed services on a whim, let your family know. He is doing awesome after 2 tours in the Navy and a few years out now. But our mom was going nuts trying to find him when he belatedly realized he wouldn't be able to contact anyone from boot camp. I left a small Midwest town to move to Vancouver, and it was the best decision I could have ever made. The only downside is how expensive this city is. I know at some point I'll need to move out if I ever want to own my own property. That said, I never thought I'd ever feel home somewhere, but after my first visit I was hooked and knew I needed to get back. I'm working on citizenship now and am hoping I'll be able to live in this province for the remainder of my life. Obligatory, this isn't about me. When my mom was younger and first moved to America, she had a roommate that did this. When she knew him, he was this chill, funny, laid-back stoner guy. They were also both fairly poor. But apparently this guy came from a super rich family. He used to be this preppy academic guy. He was in this fraternity at the huge state university he went to, and that fraternity sold tons of cocaine. Eventually, the police got a tip that the frat was dealing coke. They came to search it. The problem was, the warrant the police had didn't permit them to go in the personal bedrooms in the frat, so after finding nothing they left to get a warrant to search more thoroughly. This was fortunate, because right behind those doors, cocaine was being packaged and weighed and whatnot. Anyways, as soon as the police leave, the roommate packs a small bag and just fucking leaves. He just walks out and leaves his whole preppy life behind. He didn't talk to anyone there, he didn't finish school there, as far as those people know, he disappeared. That's the story of my mom's former roommate. He also did some other stuff, but that's not relevant. I just did it partially a couple months ago. I only went to the next state and I still have the same job. But I left everything else I knew behind. Some days I have regrets, others I am loving the liberation. It's mostly the former until I get a bit more security. Not as far as some people, but at age 18, when all my friends were at uni and I was working in a dead-end job, I just started looking elsewhere. Found a job, moved from a small rural town in the Midlands UK to Newcastle upon Tyne. That was 17 years ago. It's been phenomenal and I can't imagine living anywhere else now. It was a huge eye-opener initially as to what a sheltered and somewhat privileged life I'd lived. I always tell the story that I moved for an £11,000 a year job and I used to buy cheap pasta at Morrison's and then go to IKEA at the end of the day and ask to buy the already cooked meatballs that were going to get thrown out. That was basically the first year of me living up here until I got a pay rise. It got to the point where they would already have them packaged up for me. Carl and Nicola, you're the reason I managed to survive that first year. I've actually done this several times in life and I hope I can give you a little more perspective than someone who just did it once. As a young man, I would do this whenever I got a wild hair up my ass. I would pack a bag, which basically consisted of everything I owned, and I would hit the road. When I got somewhere I liked, I would basically couch surf until I got on my feet, and it was that simple. It's easy like that when you're young, have few attachments, few possessions, few responsibilities, and the world is your oyster. If that sounds like you, then by all means, you have your whole life ahead of you, so try it and see what happens. It is a lot easier to recover from a mistake when you are young. Then I tried to do the same thing when I was 35. It turned out to be a lot harder than I remembered. For one thing, I'm not as comfortable with couch surfing as I was 15 years earlier. I can't just be a bum anymore. I tried falling back on savings, but then I was kicking myself when all of my savings dried up in less than 3 months. I didn't make the move with a job or apartment lined up because I thought it would be fast and easy to find. But times are changing and the market is different. It took about 2 months to get a job and 3 to find a place. Even then, both the job and the home were really shitty temporary situations that I accepted out of desperation. In the end, it took me several years to recover. It wasn't nearly as easy as I remember it from my 18 to 25 years. If I'm going to move now, I will absolutely make sure that I have all of my ducks in a row before taking the plunge. Quit my job and gave up my penthouse apartment in Vancouver. Oh, man, the view of Stanley Park and the mountains was amazing, and moved to Japan for 1 year, maybe 2. 24 years later, I'm still here, happily married, and living in an even bigger penthouse apartment. Oh, man, The view of the hospital and the railroad tracks is shit. Life? Am I right? Scandinavia to Australia about 3 years ago. I never realized how much sunshine and beaches improve your life. Nature is beautiful back home and beautiful here, and so are people. Moved for love and haven't regretted it for a second. So I got divorced in 2019 and had been planning and saving for a move since. I ended up moving from north of Denver, Colorado to Tucson, Arizona on January 10th of this year. It was exactly what I needed. Rent in CO is through the roof. In Tucson I have a great 1-bedroom apartment with brand new appliances and hardwood floors in a gated community. The same apartment in Denver would run at least $800 more than what I pay here. People here are actually really friendly. It was a little off-putting at first because I wasn't used to it at all. In CO people don't talk to each other and are usually snarky when they do, but I've had really nice conversations with complete strangers in Tucson. I've also already made a lot of friends and am dating a beautiful woman who also just moved here. So far it seems like moving to Tucson was exactly what I needed to reinvigorate my life. Life was an absolute dumpster fire. I had dropped out of college, parents were disappointed in how my life was going, friends had gotten married and moved on, girlfriend had faked 2 pregnancies to keep us together, my job sucked and I was miserable. Finally had my fuck this moment when my landlord sent a certified letter to tell me that he was voiding my lease, power to do that was in the lease, in 3 months. Over those 3 months I quit paying rent, shut off the power and lived in the dark, sold almost everything I owned. Skipped town on a $1,250 motorcycle and no destination other than south. Spent the next 9 months just riding. I would ride into a town, find a day labor job, sleep in a tent in a campground, a hostel or in the shittiest hotel I could find and just see the place. A few days later I'd move on to the next random place. I think when I added it up there were 90 different towns. There were so many amazing experiences along the way, some amazing people, but nothing that screamed you belong here. Until I stopped for lunch in a cafe in a small town I wasn't planning on staying in. Hit it off with the married waitress who introduced me to her dad, who offered me a couple of days work. The guys at his shop immediately took me in like family. 2 of the guys did a full tune-up and oil change on my bike after work. That Sunday I went on a hike with the waitress, her husband, and his sister. Spent the night sitting on a park bench talking to the sister before taking her to breakfast back at the cafe in the morning. Basically 2 weeks after hitting town I was hooked. I had found home. 15 years later I'm married to the sister, waitress, and her husband now own the diner, made a couple of amazing kids, managing a great team at work, built a house, bought a boat, hunting buddies with the mayor, and plan on being buried in this amazing place when the time comes. I tell people all the time that sometimes your place in the world isn't 5 minutes from where you were born. I got a job in a new city a couple hours away from where I was living. My wife, 2-year-old son, and I had a week and a half to find a place to live, pack, move, and get settled before I had to start the new job. When we moved here I knew the name of the guy that had hired me and that's it. We knew no one else. We'd been to the city a handful of times on day trips, but that's it, so we basically knew where the main mall and a separate shopping area was. What was the experience like? Awesome. I'd totally do it all over again without even thinking about it. It's something I would recommend everyone do at least once their life, even if they move back. Moving to a new town is getting a fresh start on your life. You don't know anyone and nobody knows you. You get to make yourself out to be whoever you want to be. You aren't hit with bad memories every time you drive by that one place because you have no memories at all of anywhere around you. It's my job to do this. I work for national parks, so I'm constantly living somewhere new and I never really tell anyone. Back in 2014 I visited Bali. My friends were getting married there, so I decided I'd make it into an extended holiday. I had no job, enough money for plane tickets and hostel accommodation. Somehow I ended up being a freelancer, living and working wherever. Get on a plane with a bag, find a place, Stay for a month, and if I liked it, stay on for as long as the visa allowed. In total I spent just shy of 5 years across 9 countries, just working on the internet and seeing what there was to see. This was in the before times, of course. Harder to do now. Overall it's been good. I, 40F, have done this a few times now. The last time was spring of 2018. I had a very uncomfortable 2 weeks with some random elderly couple I met off Craigslist that I could have done without. They offered free room and board in exchange for help around the house and to be a friend to the wife when the husband worked out of town. But when I got there they turned out to be nudist swingers who wanted me to join them. That was not happening, so I left and wandered to another state. I've been here for 2 years by myself, happy. I got a great job that I enjoy. I keep to myself mostly. It's been good. I had cut all ties with my extended family decades ago, and my husband died in 2016, so there isn't anything or anyone tying me to any particular place. While I make friends easily, I don't maintain friendships by choice, so walking away and starting over isn't a big deal to me. I like the change of scenery. I like discovering new places and developing a routine full of my new favorite restaurants or parks and grocery stores, being a regular in a neighborhood gas station, then poof, I'm gone. On to the next place. When I moved into my current place I could recall 34 places I've lived in my lifetime. Lived with a meth head in a motel for 5 weeks before camping in my car for 2 more weeks. But almost 8 years later I'm almost ready to move into my own place. I moved from a big UK city to Australia 9 years ago. I was really struggling for money before I left. I now have a really well-paid job and my family have never been happier. It was a real struggle to start with, but no worse than the struggle I left. Social mobility here is much easier. It really is the lucky country. I did plan it 6 weeks in advance, but I moved while working remotely during the pandemic. I had been wanting to leave my old state for a couple of years, and could finally escape. I knew someone who was willing to let me rent a room from them until I got settled and found my own place. I broke my lease, sold/donated a bunch of stuff, put the rest in storage, then loaded up my car with my 2 pets and started driving north. 3 months later, I landed a new local job and have been much happier since. Not quite up and left. Was living with my GF for a year, and in that year she'd quit her old job, finished a 2-year business degree and couldn't get anything good with it. She hated the office/secretary type jobs and got a sleazy vibe from her bosses. My GF was cute as hell and people liked having her as eye candy. What they didn't know is that she had 3 kids who lived with their dad, not me. She was in constant war with everyone in her family, tragic history, and was sick of their attempts to interfere in her decisions. Me. I was low-key with a low-key job, but the 2 of us were great together. My job became dead-end after a year of admin merry-go-round stuff, and the future was uncertain, but a big axe was a strong possibility. I had my eye on living in Tempe/Scottsdale for over 10 years, had been there on vacation, read the Sunday paper for over a year to get familiar with the landscape, and I just wanted to bask in the extreme heat. She agreed to make a go of it with me. So, it wasn't random or overnight at all. Plus, my brother lived down there, so that was a plus. Took me a good month to get working and I bounced between 3 different jobs before finding something decent. I was glad to be there. She was okay a couple of months, then freaked out being away from family. She got more unstable over the course of a year and then just ran off, told me about a week ahead of time, so it wasn't a where'd she go? Kinda thing. By that time I was in a trade school, and that worked out well, got a great job afterwards and a good career for 12 years, had lots of fun and basically achieved 9/10 of the goals I had in mind when we first came down. The last was outlandish, and failed, then the bottom fell out on me and I've been in ruins the last 5 years, but at least have a place to sleep and I ain't starving, and have Wi-Fi. So glad I took that chance and made the move. Life is an adventure. I underestimated how much the sun would make me happy. I traded a tiny condo for a cozy home. Husband and I both found fancy new jobs and hoping for a baby soon. Quarantine killed ability to really make friends yet, but even so, we've never been happier. Do it. When my husband and I separated 2 years ago, I lost my marriage, friends, community, hobbies, job, home, pets all within 6 months. So I decided to say fuck it and I lived in Vietnam for 3 months. When I returned home I moved to the other side of the city. I have an awesome apartment, have a great job, new partner and a new community of friends. Something about moving away was a great reset. I did this. Moved from Ireland to New Zealand, so about as far as you can get before you start coming back. Moved during the recession, when I was unemployed and job prospects were few, and have had opportunities here I never would have had staying at home. Moving back would feel like emigrating to a whole new country now, so much has changed. It's been wonderful, but you do have a sense of being split in two, and the loneliness, guilt and distance from family really hits when things aren't going so well. However, zero regrets. When I was 23 I moved from CT to WA. I was in a band that was doing okay, and managing restaurants at the time. I grew up super poor, and even though I'd had an apartment with girlfriend, I had very little. Like, I lived there for a year and never had a couch. No car. Not even a license. I couldn't afford a vehicle so I spent the money on acquiring my license. I had a 91 years old grandfather in WA. He wanted to stay independent and live in his home, but he needed help. I hadn't seen him since I was 13 and had only spoken to him a handful of times since, but he offered me the opportunity to live with him. I wouldn't have to pay anything, plus he had an extra car I could use. So, I did it. My girlfriend and I packed up what little we owned in her car and drove across country to live with my grandfather in a small retirement town. Aside from my girlfriend, he was the only person I knew for 3,000 miles. I got a job working in a restaurant in about 3 weeks. My girlfriend dropped me off until I got my license, which didn't take long. Then I saw on the news that a government agency had a critical staffing shortage, so I decided I'd put in for that opportunity and ended up being selected. I ended up working 45 minutes south of home, with odd hours. The GF worked up north. We developed different social circles and split up 6 months after moving. My grandfather passed away about 6 months later. I was alone and homesick. I looked at avenues to move back to CT, but I had a stable job and made a livable wage for the first time in my life, so I didn't want to go back to nothing. I ended up getting an apartment in a bigger city. I've now worked for that agency for 14 years now. I have lifelong friends, married, kids, and I'm a homeowner. Coming from absolutely poverty, I'm pretty proud of what I accomplished. I picked up and left for New York City. Then I picked up and left 2 more times before I finally returned to my hometown. It was nice to experience living in different cities, but I wasn't home in any of those places. Now I appreciate my hometown. I've always wished to do this. Just disappear off of the face of Earth, relieved face, relieved face. If you leave a spouse or partner to do this, I've experienced from being on the other side. Except to get away from any form of abuse, few other things are crueler and more devastating to the person who is left behind. Moved all my furniture onto my lawns and had a yard sale, including my car. I bought a ticket to Hawaii/Maui. I knew one person there and not well. I wasn't expecting it, but he picked me up from the airport and took me home. I told him I didn't want to stay for more than a few days, but I went and got a job down on Front Street waiting tables. After about the 3rd day, I cleaned up the house really well before work and afterward camped out on the beach. Eventually made friends with a dude named Angel who went by Mud. We played some music together by the beach. He introduced me to the pack of homeless beach goons all around my age. Fell in with them pretty easily. Everyone took care of each other, food was shared and people who had cars packed them full. Then the first friend called me and asked me when I was coming back. I told him I'd come over and help make dinner. Over dinner him and his roommates all told me I had an open door policy at their house. BC I was respectful and clean, which still my biggest takeaway for when traveling. LPT clean people's kitchens and living rooms when they aren't looking and you'll always be welcome back. Still decided to not wear out my welcome and only stayed maybe 3 days out of the week, rolled around with the goons. Sometimes we'd spend all day busking for cash, sometimes we'd go to the east side of the island and explore the jungle. Saw every bit of the island, slept on every shore, surfed everything but Jaws. I am a very amateur and it scared me. Jumped off waterfalls, worked on a fruit farm, had a traditional luau. Got shibaried to the rainbow eucalyptuses, ran from a wild pig, kicked some coral and almost died from staph, Jednai on the beach. Most nights I slept on the beach, others at the house, but on more than one occasion I end up in multi-million-dollar houses and condos for the night. Some of the gaudiest decorating I've ever seen. Interactions with the native, not local white people, are ultimately what made me want to leave. Not because of the reverse racism I was warned about by white people, but because they were so kind and respectful despite the fact most of their aunties and uncles had been pushed to tiny corners of the island. It ultimately felt like trespassing, and so I headed back to mainland, unsure of my destination. So I traveled through Cali, went vagrant style around Venice Beach, hitched a ride to SFB, then ride-shared my way up and stayed in Humboldt for a few weeks in a music studio, before catching a ride east. Planned on getting all the way back to North Carolina, but then landed in Colorado where I knew a lot of people. Got blizzarded in as soon as I arrived, so I started thinking about work. Ended up getting a job and a nice spot in Denver, and I've been here for 2 years plus now. I have a lot more friends, a lot more confidence in my ability to survive in the world, and a lot better perspective of who was my friend and who I just happened to know. All in all, I highly recommend everyone do this once in their life. I've seen so many people try and plan their move to perfection only to never do it. But be as ready for the hardships as the adventures, because they're truly inseparable in my eyes. I moved from Mexico to the UK, and it has been an amazing decision. I was already living in a flat with all the furniture and stuff in Mexico City when a breaking point idea came in my mind. Just for some context, my sister was already living in the UK and she said to me in the past that she could recommend me at her job to start working there. I spoke to my wife and said to her all this plan. It was difficult for both, but it was more difficult for her because her families are extremely closed, and the first nephew'd been born. My parents gave me the money to buy a non-return ticket from Mexico to Toronto, UK, which took off the second week of January 2019. Pretty much, I had 6 months to save money, sell furniture and stuff and find a job. Luckily, a company contacted me and offered me a job in southwest England. Just 1 week before my leaving date we got married so my wife could apply for the spouse visa 6 months after. The flight from Mexico to the UK was very tiring because I waited in Toronto airport for 18 hours. It was snowing heavily and I preferred to stay in the airport. I slept on the waiting chairs for around 10 hours, until the flight was just about to take off. I brought 2 big cases, my laptop and my PS4, third best decision, and I lived in a spare room on the back garden in the house of one of my co-workers. After 9 months my wife arrived to the UK, so we started our journey again. We moved into a different flat. I got a job as an AP, which it was very challenging and stressful, not for the job itself, but my first manager harassed me and made awful comments about me. Some of them fell in the racism line. I am just about to change my job again, looking to start from scratch my new career. Although I miss my family, this has been an amazing journey, and to be honest, many things in our life have improved. And of course, it has not been easy, and I just made a brief resume of all the things that we have gone through. This is maybe not exactly the type of situation Op is asking about, at least it wasn't the first thing that came to my mind, but looking at other responses I guess it's relevant. In 2010 I was offered a 4-month contract in Finland in a field I never dreamed I would work in. At the time I had steady employment in Michigan but not a lot of prospects to do something I really loved. I tried to see if I could get 4 months leave from my job, but understandably, as it was during the busiest time of our year, it was denied. I thought about it for another day or two and decided to throw caution to the wind and take a chance on this opportunity halfway around the world, knowing full well that when I returned I'd have no job, no immediate prospects and no place to live. I didn't want to keep paying for an empty apartment while I was gone. That initial 4-month contract ended up getting extended a few times and eventually turned into a permanent one. I spent almost 10 years with that company. I'm now at my second job in Helsinki, Finland. I'm married and have a 1.5-year-old son. I haven't been back to the States since 2019, and that was for work. I haven't been back just to visit since 2013. As others have said, taking that chance was the best choice I ever made. Not only am I far happier than I've ever been, but I'm now a veteran in a field I never dreamed I could join. I've experienced more in the last 10 years than I did in 30+ living stateside, and it's opened my eyes to so much that we can be blind to living in the bubble of the United States. I love where I came from and my friends and family who are still there, but, honestly, I have zero desire to go back there to live. I used to live in Austin, Texas as a musician, but then I stopped playing music due to the death of 3 out of 5 bandmates from suicide and heroin abuse, myself included in the 5. I got clean, joined the army, left the country for a while, lost some more people, came back, got diagnosed with the crazy, and now I try to walk the straight and narrow every day, but usually falter at the lips of a whiskey bottle most nights. I now perform stand-up comedy and am rising in the ranks, but those memories of the past never leave you no matter where you go. I make people laugh for a living now so they can forget the pain that life brings us. I hope one day I will find some peace, but I have not found it yet. My husband and I did it a few years after we were married. We were struggling, young. His stepdad inherited a small house on the other side of the country. He wanted to rent it out. We jumped at the chance, took our savings and drove for 5 days to get there. At first it was incredibly hard. I hated it and missed my family and friends so much. I think as a couple it really helped us grow. We had no one else but each other. We stayed in there for 6 years before we moved back for an illness in the family. It was such an amazing experience. I was 17 when I met the younger brother of one of my adult friends on Discord. He was 20 at the time. A year of online dating and we finally met in real life. I dropped out of college and we moved 1,200 miles away from my parents. I lost my car, all of my money, and my dignity. I am grateful for what I went through. It was really hard moving from a liberal city to conservative, redneck country. We didn't even have reliable water. I look back now and wish I had never met him. I'm back with my parents now, safe and sound. I will never, ever try something so reckless again. Edit, thank you so much for silver. I was 18. The family was out. I put a note on my bed saying I'm leaving. I'll be okay, and left. That was 50 years ago. I'm super glad I did it. I have wanted to do this. However, I know that the problems wouldn't stay behind. I learned this from watching someone I knew who would bounce around from town to town, then moved around the world, only to come home and do it again. They were constantly trying to find happiness, but would be disappointed when they found out that there are crappy people everywhere. Their job exposed them to some really terrible people, working with animals. They couldn't take it anymore and ended their life. I have wanted to up and go for a long time, but I know that I need to sort my mind out first so that I don't end up in a similar cycle. I moved from the UK to NJ in my early 20s. Plagued with anxiety and depression in the UK, made worse in the States by the isolation of knowing hardly anyone. In my 30s I moved from the UK to East Africa. Best decision of my life, as I met someone and had my beautiful child and then adopted my youngest child. Moved back to the UK realizing that if you're not happy where you are, moving to the other side of the world shouldn't be the first choice before therapy. Met my BF on Reddit, quit my job of 10 years and moved to be with him in another state after 8 months of long distance. in school for a new career and so happy with my new life 2 years later. It didn't actually happen all overnight, but I did quit my job without another one lined up and moved across the country, thousands of miles from all my family, for no real reason other than Colorado seemed like a better place to live than Wisconsin. And it is. I got a job delivering for Amazon, which was less than ideal, but it paid well enough to build up some small savings and recover from the cost of the move while finding a better job. Now I'm doing what I love in the state where I've always wanted to live. It took a lot of work and compromise, but it turned out in the end. I lived in AS through high school, college and after, so I had grown roots there. Nice condo, decent paying job which I enjoyed, had solid friends, family lived up the street, and I was part of a co-ed soccer league. My days consisted of getting my morning cup of coffee, work out, go to work, come home, then play soccer, draw on my iPad or play video games with my roommates. One day, as me and my roommate were working out, I had a sudden urge to join the military. Never wanted to before this moment. Next day I went straight to the recruiter's office, said I want to join the Navy, and 2 weeks later I was sworn in and was leaving for boot camp the week thereafter. I sold my condo to my roommate, broke the lease of my car, tied all loose ends, kissed my family goodbye and said see ya later to my friends. I am now in the Navy and got my orders for San Diego for my schooling, then Japan shortly after that. I am fucking happy and there's a new challenge every day. Funny part, the only ones who's reached out to me is my family. Friends didn't say congrats or nothing, good riddance. I'm gonna live my life and have fun doing what I wanna do on my terms. I didn't fully start a new life, but I did move back across the country to my home state, California, to work a job with my uncle. I wanted a restart, to change things for myself. And it's going okay. Very homesick at first, being away from my mom and siblings and everyone. But I know in the long run it's so worth it. I had an extremely toxic relationship with my abusive mother and suffered her shit for literal years before finally having enough. I told her I was done and I meant it. 3 days later myself and my fiancé packed everything we could of mine into his car and I've never looked back. I'll be starting my new life officially in September when I enroll into a faraway uni, something I've been aiming towards for 5 years now and something which the egg donor never believed I'd actually do. Leaving the way I did was one of the best decisions I've ever made and I haven't spoken to her since. Smile. 9 years ago I was totally burned out on pre-med courses, working 3 jobs, trying to mediate between constantly fighting family members. The final straws were watching a good friend slide into addiction and another recover from a life-threatening illness only to return to old habits and minimize his life even further. I couldn't do it anymore. I wanted so much more for my life, and it was terrifying to see the walls collapsing in on me. Every choice I was making was burying me further into village life with village people. I don't mean to bash on small town life, it really works for some people, but it's not healthy for me at all. Met a really amazing guy, quit everything, and spontaneously moved to Europe with 2 suitcases. In the meantime I've lived in 3 additional countries, all with the love of my life by my side. I got my graduate degree without any debt, and even my medical school dream is coming true this year. It's delayed, of course, but I'll be studying it in another language, which is mind-blowing for me. 9 years ago I was so despondent that I didn't think that I'd even get the chance, and now the door is open. It's been hard as hell, for sure. I don't want to downplay how many nights I cried myself to sleep thinking that I'd made a terrible mistake and thrown my future down the drain. There have been entire years that I felt like I was just treading water, learning nothing, and working menial jobs. My social contacts were nil, and I ran out of money a few times. I worry about my mom getting older and my nieces and nephews growing up without me. But, overall, this has been worth it. Step by step my life has turned out exactly how I imagined it in my wildest dreams. So far, in my short life, the regret of inaction is one of the most bitter emotions that I've experienced. I'm planning to up and move after COVID. I don't have a terrible life where I am currently, but I'm just sick of seeing the same things every day, seeing the same view out my window and hopping from one minimum wage job to the other. And I have friends elsewhere, so it would be nice to live closer and spend more time with them. I left from Texas to go to Senegal to marry someone I met on a Muslim marriage site. I landed in Dakar only knowing one person on the entire continent. He was waiting at the airport and we were finally in each other's presence for the first time. We went to his friend's apartment to change into our wedding clothes. We then went to a mosque and got married. Less than an hour after meeting in person, he was my husband. We lived there in Senegal for 2 years and then moved to North Carolina. He is literally the best man I have ever known. We've been married 7 years and I still am amazed at how wonderful my life is now. After years of fixing my credit, I moved from the hood where you hear gunshots every night to 1.5 acres in the country, and my kids couldn't be happier. It was strange and scary in the beginning until things started stabilizing. Did it twice in my life. Best decision ever. First time running away from my abusive family. After my 18th birthday, moved across the country to live with a guy I met online. I made a career out of my hobby, but it was hard. Female in tech, I meet with a lot of sexism. Fed up with it, I dropped everything and moved to more civilized country. I'm doing great here. Language barrier is still annoying, but my perspective for future never were better. I only envy the supportive families and old good friends normal people have. I lost all of it. BTW, the guy I met online, we are still together after 17 years, could not done it without him. I will let you know when I figure it out. I was badly addicted to alcohol and some other drugs. After a few tries I became sober, went from 100 to 0, quit everything, alcohol and all the drugs. Left most of my friends behind and soon after moved to a new city. Got a new job there and found lots of nice people who are today good friends of mine. Still sober since 6 years and this city became my new home. Best decisions I ever made. I did this in my same town. Not a huge town, 3 mil strong, takes an hour driving from one part of town to another. Never do I run into anyone I grew up with until social media happened. Dropped off, moved to another part of town, lived on campus at a university and reinvented myself. Met the mother of my children and left behind the unproductive person I was tracking to be. I'm planning to do this year. It's terrifying, but I know it's what's best for me. I just don't know if my destination is the best choice. The last girl I dated did this. She lasted 6 weeks here before she missed her friends, family, home, old routine. She claimed to hate her roommates, job, boss here, etc. According to her, it was a major struggle. I don't know if that was because here was that hard, or over there was just so easy. I honestly don't know. She gave up and bailed back to where she came from. I haven't bothered to check in how it is going over there because I felt like she didn't give here a good enough go before bailing. I didn't move right away, but after my parents disowned me in 2018 because they were /RQ lunatics, I blocked everyone from my family, eventually quit all my social media since they started trying to stalk me, got a new phone, and changed my name in a different state legally to something totally ungoogleable. Legally my name is now something like Taylor Swift. It didn't happen overnight. The name change took a few months when I realized they were looking for me. Being disowned ruined me financially just as I was entering senior year of college, and I had to withdraw, and ended as a sex worker with a pimp and everything that goes with that. It's been really hard and you could say my life was ruined, but I have no regrets. My family was really toxic and I'm better off. I know they expected me to crawl home and beg for forgiveness, and I know they freaked out when I didn't, but my feeling is when my mom says I was dead to her, I took her serious. I told them in a letter they'd never hear from me again, and they won't. I am done with college with no debt, and while it's not a great time to get a straight job, I'm trying and may do something entrepreneurial going forward. I am really looking forward to starting a family from scratch someday and just being a good mom. TL, doctor, wasn't my idea, no regrets. Left my small town for the big city when I was about 23. I lived in a van with my wife and 3 dogs for about 3 weeks. It sucked, but it was also great. We had a great little setup right by the Mississippi River. We both got jobs and found an apartment eventually, but those first couple weeks of real freedom changed my life. 4 years ago I left my abusive ex-husband who would beat, sexually abuse, and keep my kids, and I'm malnourished and dirty. It got so out of hand one night he attempted suicide. While he was in surgery after the attempt, we both went into surgery cause we both got harmed, but I got out earlier. I packed up my kids, dogs, cats, and we all hopped into a Honda Civic Coupe and drove as far as we could. Never looked back. Got a divorce, restraining order, went under a protection program for a few years, and now the man is gone. Maybe he finally killed himself, or maybe he ran off to be horrible to someone else. All I know is I'm writing this from my luxury apartment in the city of my dreams, about to take my healthy and happy kids to daycare, and can smell the sausage sizzling. My kids are still asleep. Smile. I was addicted to opiates and weighed about 85 pounds, I had killed all my friendships, quit my job, wrecked my car, and was living in a wood plank shack with a sheet for a door. I didn't have 2 dimes to rub together, and when I did, it went to drugs. I was so depressed, that when I looked in the mirror every day, I was excited to see more and more of my ribs and hip bones jutting out, the knots of my spine sticking out in my back, my collarbone and my stick legs, because all this meant I was successfully closer to dying. One day I felt like my eyelids were sticky, and it took me all day to realize that my face was just finally skinny enough to where my eyes had sunk a little deeper into my skull, causing the skin on my eyelids to rub together when I opened them after blinking. After one night of particularly heavy drug use, I was kidnapped and raped, and I managed to escape, wearing nothing except an oversized t-shirt the whole way home, and when I got there I swallowed all my drugs and overdosed. I woke up in the hospital several days later, and finally called my mom and asked her to get me a plane ticket to anywhere, and promised I'd get sober if she did. When I arrived at the airport, I didn't have any money to check my only suitcase, and so I had to throw it away and board the plane with nothing but a blanket and my ID and a gnarly come down. When I arrived I felt very lost, very disconnected, but somehow much more safe. I immediately checked into rehab, got clean, gained 40 pounds. After I got out it still took several months to scrape myself off the ground, and I upgraded to living in a super run-down car, while working an overnight job, and managed to save some money to drive to where I really wanted to live. Then came my real fresh start. I quickly kept upgrading to better places and better jobs, better car, new friends, etc. And about a year after I first got clean, I was living on my own, with a good car, got into a cool new hobby, went back to school. Within the year after that, I got a job teaching my new hobby, got a great dog, and met a great guy who had moved to my city for a fresh start after he had a bad breakup and a fresh DUI. A year after that, we were married, in our first house. He began his new career, got himself a good car, things were amazing. Then someone broke into our house, and the ensuing standoff between them and the police literally destroyed everything we owned in the house and the house itself. We had to save for a new house and new belongings, sort of start from scratch. But we had our cars and our jobs and our dogs still, so it was not as hard that time. Especially because we had already done it before. And we had each other. It only took us about 3 months to get back to where we were. Actually, better than we were. These days I literally feel like a rich person. I'm not, by any means at all, and I don't even necessarily think I'm that cool or that good of a person, but just having hot running water and being able to order food from my consistently working phone whenever I want. I feel like a goddamn wizard. I still sleep in too late, I have been slow about school. But holy shit, I have 3 different kinds of shampoo, bottled water in the fridge, and a spare bedroom that I use as my own personal office/lounge/closet, and I buy my dog bully sticks and Himalayan cheese chews all the time. He knows so many tricks. And my husband is a saint too, he's like my example of how I wanna treat other people. I'm so fucking lucky. If you've ever been low, or if you are low right now, you can just leave. You don't even have to prepare or save up or have anything, as long as you're willing to get humble for now. You can do it. It's worth doing it. It's so worth doing it. Just up and walked out on an unhealthy, unhappy relationship. I felt I was just a convenience for my then partner. We had been in a relationship for 5 years and had no mutual children or financial binds. I am now living my life on my terms. I have never been happier. I now have the time to pursue my interests in life. I have made my own new friends. I do not feel lonely as I am so busy. My only regret is that I wasted 5 years on a relationship that was going nowhere. To the dismay of everybody, I announced I wanted to get married and escape the bum life of being my parents' driver and assistant and housekeeper, ran away with my GF and married her, to the dismay of everybody in her family, but we just kept insisting this is what we want and if you disagree we can get lost, you know, which we proved by living alone doing odd jobs for a year. But they wanted us around now that we have a baby, so now we live in my wife's home.